Israel's Doha attack. On the morning of May 9, 2025, the sky above the quiet residential quarter of Al-Sad in Doha cracked open. Israeli F-35 fighters, skirting radar curtains that had always been assumed impenetrable over a Gulf capital, loosed their payloads on a row of villas where Hamas negotiators were finalizing their reply to the latest American ceasefire paper. Within minutes, 6 bodies, 5 Palestinians and 1 Qatari security officer, lay beneath the rubble, and the Middle East discovered that even the airspace of a mediator state could be breached. The shockwave traveled faster than the blast itself. By nightfall, every Arab capital was vibrating with a sense of trespass, while inside Israel the raid was being painted as a stroke of strategic hygiene. Two worlds, separated by only a few hundred kilometers of desert, told the same night in two irreconcilable tongues. In the Arab words, the attack was first felt as a physical shudder inside the chest, the knowledge that the war which had gnawed at Gaza for 20 months had leapt the fence into the Gulf. Qataris poured into the broad ceremonial square outside the Emiri Diwan, waving only the maroon and white national flag. For once no Palestinian banners were needed because the offense was personal. "They came for our guests," a young engineer told Al Jazeera's camera, voice cracking, while we were serving them coffee. The Prime Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman, gave voice to that humiliation in a press conference that Arabs replayed for days. He called the raid state terrorism and Netanyahu a narcissist who bombs the very table where his host offers him peace. Across the region the vocabulary was identical. In Cairo, President Sisi told his cabinet that the strike had polluted the idea of Arab hospitality itself. In Baghdad, the foreign ministry labeled it a cowardly act that drags the conflict into the house of reconciliation. Even states that had lately toyed with normalization, Abu Dhabi, Manama, Rabat, rediscovered a collective tongue. The UAE summoned Israel's chargé d'affaires within hours, and the Gulf Cooperation Council issued a communiqué vowing a united deterrent response. The subtext, whispered in every majlis and diwan, was fear. If Qatar's American radars and British Typhoons could not keep the bombers out, whose sky was safe? Israel answered that question with a different grammar altogether. In the Israeli narrative, the same villas were not guest houses but command nodes, places where Hamas leaders sipped coffee by day and signed death warrants by night, a line repeated by the Prime Minister's office and echoed across evening talk shows. When Netanyahu emerged at the U.S. Embassy the afternoon of the raid, he did not apologize. Instead, he presented the strike as the missing punctuation mark in the ceasefire document Israel had just accepted. "We removed the obstructionists so that the deal can breathe," he said, describing the operation as wholly independent yet wholly necessary. Channel 12 split its screen between the ruins in Doha and the faces of Israeli hostages still in Gaza, implying a direct equation. The ambassador in Washington, Yehiel Leiter, was still blunter. "If we didn't get them this time, we'll get them next time, wherever they are, whenever they are." In the Knesset's corridors the mood was almost buoyant. For the first time since the war began, pilots had carried the chase beyond Iran's border, proving that Israel's long arm could reach any boardroom where Hamas tried to cloak itself in diplomatic immunity. Only the families of the remaining hostages sounded a discordant note, pleading that killing negotiators might sign their sons' death warrants, but even their tears were folded into the larger story of a country that refuses to let its enemies breathe abroad. Between these two telling lies a chasm that no communique can bridge. Arabs saw the raid as the moment the last rule of regional order, the neutrality of the mediator, was shredded. Israelis saw it as the moment hypocrisy was stripped away and war returned to its honest, pitiless core. One side tasted betrayal in the mouth, the other tasted vindication. And so the night of May 9, 2025 entered the region's folklore under two titles. In Doha it is called The Treachery of Al-Sad, while in Tel Aviv it is filed simply as Operation Guesthouse, a quiet boast that no house is closed to Israeli justice, and no Arab sky beyond reach. In that May 9 attack, 5 mid-rank Hamas political officers were killed outright. A 6th body wore the midnight blue uniform of the Qatari Special Guard Service. Within minutes, the footage of grey smoke curling above the Persian Gulf skyline was looping across every screen in the region, and the word sovereignty began trending in Arabic, Turkish and Farsi alike. By nightfall, The Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, had signed 2 short letters, one to the Arab League, one to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. The wording was identical: an act of state terrorism has been committed on our soil, the enemy has broken the ultimate red line. We request an immediate joint summit to decide our collective reply. Both organizations obliged. 48 hours later, the foreign ministers of 57 member states touched down at Hamad International, and on Monday, September 15, their heads of state followed. The Sheraton Grand, a pyramid of mirrored glass that had hosted every event of Gulf crisis since 1990, was ring-fenced by 3 concentric cordons of Turkish, Pakistani and Qatari troops. Inside, the chandeliers had been dimmed to a funereal glow and the conference hall renamed Al-Quds Hall for the day. At 9 o'clock sharp, the Qatari Prime Minister, Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani, opened the session. In a voice that diplomats present described as low but shaking, he accused Israel of having weaponized diplomacy, striking Doha precisely when Hamas was studying an American truce map. He then ceded the floor to the rotating Arab League chair, Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who warned that the attack had shattered the residual notion that Gulf capitals are immune. One after another, the microphones lit up. Iran's President Pezeshkian called the strike a declaration of regional war and urged the room to form a joint operations cell. Turkey's Erdogan, arriving straight from the UN General Assembly, demanded economic strangulation of Israel through a coordinated boycott of Israeli banks and tech firms. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, making his first public appearance since the strike, struck a friendlier to Israel note: retaliation must be strategic, not emotional, and must not hand Israel the pretext it seeks. Behind the scenes, 2 working groups toiled in side rooms. The Legal Political Drafting Group, co-chaired by Kuwait and Pakistan, produced a 12-page text that branded the Doha raid a grave violation of the sovereignty of a UN member state and invoked Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. The Defense Cooperation Group, convened at Iran's request and attended, quietly, by Turkish and Chinese military observers, sketched a proposal for a Islamic Gulf airspace shield that would integrate Qatari, Saudi, Omani and Pakistani radars and let Ankara or Beijing plug in early warning satellites. The final communiqué, issued in the evening of on the same day of May 15, read out by the OIC Secretary-General, gives the following 8 operative clauses. 1. Condemnation and referral. The attack is state terrorism. The summit will petition the UN General Assembly for an urgent session and ask the Security Council to sanction Israel under Chapter 7. 2. Diplomatic downgrade. All member states are invited to recall their ambassadors from Tel Aviv and suspend any remaining normalization contacts. The Abraham Accord signatories UAE and Bahrain face no penalty, but are urged to freeze further steps. 3. Legal track. Qatar will file a war crime dossier at the International Criminal Court, backed by evidence kits supplied by every attending state. 4. Economic measures. A voluntary boycott on Israeli goods, modeled on the 1973 selective embargo, is to begin October 1. Islamic development banks will create a $10 billion fund to cushion any signatory that loses Western trade preferences. 5. Defense cooperation. The embryonic airspace shield is approved in principle. Feasibility studies will be finished by December, with Turkey and, informally, China designated technical partners. 6. Palestinian statehood. The summit vows to co-sponsor a UN resolution recognizing Palestine along the 1967 lines, to be tabled during the current General Assembly. 7. Hostage ceasefire track. Despite the attack, Qatar, Egypt and Turkey will keep mediating, but Israel is warned that any further strike on negotiators will be treated as wrecking the peace process. 8. Follow-up mechanism. A joint Arab-Islamic Ministerial Committee, meeting monthly in Cairo, will monitor implementation and prepare graduated further steps if Israel refuses accountability. The Sheraton Hall erupted in a standing ovation when the Qatari Emir thanked the delegates for proving that Arab and Muslim blood still runs hot for honor. Yet even in the glow of television lights, seasoned observers noted the caveats. The boycott is voluntary, the ICC referral will face a US veto, and the air shield is still only a study. Still, for the first time in decades, the final text used the word sanctions in reference to Israel, and did so in the capital of a country that hosts the largest U.S. air base in the Middle East. That, delegates whispered in the corridors, was already a revolution of sorts, one triggered by a single morning's raid on a quiet Doha suburb.